Right. Welcome. It's Public Eye. My name is Fumi, and it's a pleasure to spend the next hour with you. Today, we are going to attempt to answer a question that seems very simple, but it comes up over and over again. Every time there's a conversation about leadership in Nigeria, people argue, is it the system or the people? Do we get the leaders that we deserve or the leaders that we are? And this quest or this challenge or this need that we have now to move the country into a prosperous future, how will we achieve it? Is it by changing the system or changing the people? Right? I shan't do this on my own. We're going to do it together, and then we're going to get experts to have the conversation with, and you at home will also be joining us right after I take this break.
Good people, great nation. Nigeria has often been plagued by various issues, including corruption, inefficiency, and lack of accountability. While some attribute these issues to the country's people, others argue that the problem lies in the system and processes.
Nigerian biggest problem where they affects everybody where they this Nigeria. Now, bad governance.
Any government that comes kind of looks for temporary solutions, and then after the government goes, that solution is no longer sustainable. So everything crashes, and they have to start all over again.
There's no consequence management in Nigeria. People do things and they don't get punished. But if you do something bad and you get punished for it, for example, I think that will send a signal to all other people who are doing all of those things.
It's very easy to be influenced by a system, right? Now, this system is here now. Before I was born, I think this has been like that. Now that I'm born into the system, it's hard for me to change that system, but very easy for that system to influence me. So I think that's one thing.
So now I think if we are able to have a change of government as it is now, I have the belief that things might change.
Until our wills are collectively strong enough to want to overhaul the system and just change it, I think this will still be something that will be recurring.
We explore the debate between the two schools of thought and how some Nigerians and organizations are working to address these challenges by advocating for systemic reforms and changes.
Okay, Public Eye today, conversation. Which is the problem, the system or the people? In the quest to get not only the leadership we want, but the nation we know we have capacity to be, what needs to change? My first guest, let me introduce him, and then you see why I smile. Dr. Kayode Eesuola. Eesuola, I pronounced it twice for you to take notes. But for now, let us know that he is a research associate professor at the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies, University of Lagos. Hello and welcome, Dr. Eesuola.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. I have many mischievous questions at the back of my head. So I'll start with the least mischievous. Okay. What does your name mean, Eesuola?
Well, we all know what Ola means. For those of you who are Yoruba, if you are not Yoruba, Ola could mean wealth, could mean nobility, whatever is positive is attributed to Ola. And that's why many Yoruba names have Ola, Olayinka, Olatunde, Fumilola, yes. Eesuola. Eesu is literally a cluster of whatever. Something sujo, nkan sujo, Eesu. But we also have the word Eesu in Yoruba lexicon, which refers to Well, I don't know what the English people call that, but it's a situation in which you have people of like minds who come together to contribute money periodically.
Right.
And so if you are seven, the seven of you contribute 70,000, 10,000 per person. And at the end, one person picks it and it goes turn by turn.
Right.
I don't think the Englishman has any word for this.
Which is why it's interesting to me. Because when I listen to you explain your name, it seems to me that in the language already, and I presuppose in the culture, we are talking about certain political economies, certain political economic ideologies, behaviors, expectations, and so on and so forth.
Definitely.
Why can't they do the work? Where will they do now?
Well,
Why do we, so right now Nigeria, I'm not even clear what our political economic philosophy is. You know, we say, do we practice capitalism? What sort of capitalism do we practice? Are we a pseudo welfare state? Are we a social? That's plenty stories. But the question I'm very interested in you helping us to understand is why, as the example that even your name clearly, when I hear your name as a Yoruba person, I get it. I'm not sure about all these Gen Z types getting it.
well, they may be aloof, you know.
But why has it not traveled through the culture to the core political economic ideology that runs this country?
Well, the reason it has not traveled is clear to all of us. Once upon a time, we were a people like other peoples of the world. We had our own origin, our thoughts, our philosophy, our civilization. And then suddenly, some people came from God knows where. I don't know what they were searching for. They used gun and machete and coercive instruments to truncate the processes of our own development and civilization. And then they did not only truncate, they also imposed their own upon us. And so it became double tragedy. They stopped what was developing in our system, and then they imposed another one. So one got almost completely lost at a point, and that's our worldview, our political economy, our philosophy. And then the other one that is imposed on us have been going around us, and we've been going around them, and then we are merely perambulating because we cannot really understand them. And I'm speaking this emphatically. Up till today, like you insinuated in your prologue, we don't even know if we are practicing capitalism or socialism. And not only that, even the political system that you run, you are not sure it is democracy. Of course, on pages of paper, you call it democracy. But is this what the pink man from Europe and America sold to you as democracy? And so that's what happens when you find yourself in between the devil and the blue sea. Therefore, I'm saying that whatever happens in the society is produced by the society itself, you and I. Because if there are no speakers of evil, there won't be hearers of evil. If you have a society, for instance, where the reward system is egalitarian, it is difficult, if not impossible, for corruption to come up. Yeah. So a corrupt person is not necessarily a bad person. He's probably corrupt because the system forces him to be corrupt. When you employ a young graduate and you sign a letter as a government that his salary is going to be 30,000 naira per month, and his house allowance is 1,700 naira. Go to the civil service, that's what you get. And you know, as a government, there is no way 1,700 naira can even get an apartment for one day. And you are signing him, you are signing that letter for that person for 1 month. You are indirectly institutionalizing corruption. You are telling that person, I can only pay you this legitimately. Go, therefore, and seek illegitimate means. So if we look at it from that behavioral perspective, you see that the leader did not naturally sell people into slavery. The system threw it up. So we'd rather blame the system holistically rather than blame the leader.
Okay, we're going to come back to that because these are very fine, they're very fine conversation that we should, just actually layer one another to be able to unpack them as a people. When we started even with the conversation from your name, it was clear when you defined Ola, it was a very nuanced, very layered definition. You would think that a people who consider Ola to be everything, all encompassing,
Yes.
so it's not just money. So for a modern day person, if you say Ola or Ola, they will think, oh, I want blow. Once you have money, once you blow,
it goes
you have
beyond
Ola.
that.
But in the culture or in the language, it suggests that these are people who consider so much more.
Yeah.
To
Your
be
wife,
able
your
to-
children, your family,
home, your everything,
your name, your
so
reputation.
all of that, the complex layer
They
of all of that is
combine
what.
to-
And then Eesu, where they've already, you explained to us that it could be different groups of people. So you could have academics who work together for
Of
a
course.
collective good.
Of course, they do
You could
it.
have market women who work together for a collective good.
They do it.
So all of that is within the system already. How can that same system that had that, and I understand the truncation, you've explained it very clearly.
Good.
How can that system, how is that system ended up with this now? I mean, I don't understand it. How do you, and apart from, we just use Yoruba language as an example.
Yes, an
I wish I
example.
understood Igbo because I'm sure it's in the Igbo language, it's in the Hausa language, it's in Ibibio, it's in Efik, it's in all of it. So how now?
How did we end up this way?
Yes.
Yeah. If you ask me, who I go ask? I know there is a popular song like that,
Yes.
although I don't know the name of the singer.
Omaumi.
Omaumi. If you ask me, who I go ask? How did we get here? Truncation is the reason. Now, I was going towards the story, the record the other time. You advised me to stop. The joy is that we have this kind of conversation going on to conscientize people that we were not like this. That something happened that threw us into this. And then that there are records of what we were and what we should do in terms of the socio-political philosophy of our people, well documented. In terms of development projects and the economic activities of our people, well documented. Now, when we have tried one thing and it is not working for us, we don't need the wisdom of Orunmila to go back to that which we have not tried well and see if it's going to work better. I'm not essentializing. I'm not saying what is African is extremely and completely better than what is Western, and I will not agree that the other one is better too. I'm saying try the two. You have tried something and it does not work for you. For instance, the page, the textbook kind of democracy that we are practicing in Nigeria, which we always talk about without having understanding of, has failed Africa completely. You don't want to mention any country, just one in Africa today, that is doing well because it is a democracy. No. It has brought war, it has brought crisis, it has brought, name it. And then you now see that, why don't you try something else? And in trying something else, you have records. We had political philosophy. We had political thoughts. We had political ideas before the truncation.
Right.
Isn't it high time we tried those ones
Something
and then we saw what comes out of them? I mean, that's just my thinking.
We're going to take a break because I want us to hold that thought on trying something else.
We need to.
What that something else really would be. And to be able to try something else, we have to understand what is the resistance to what was. Because there is some sort of resistance. Because as we are sitting here now, if I say, okay, all of us, let us go back, let us use that these principles are in, for want of a better expression, is in Ifa, everybody will run. you know? So what is the resistance? How do you overcome the resistance? And what exactly are we going back to? And is it even possible to go back at all?
Okay.
Right after the break.
Okay.
I had the strangest phone call today, Adrian.
I knew your dirty little secrets.
This was another lifetime before I met you, Ada.
It's all lies. Isn't it, Adrian?
There's some truth in it.
If your personal life is affecting your work and your colleagues.
If I had told you about my past, you never would have given me a chance.
That is not a decision for you to make.
It's good you came. You see, the Holy Spirit spoke to me about you.
I remember you.
We go way back.
Why are you doing this to us? I gave you everything.
This is a sin.
You're a coward. Get out!
Sooner or later, something must kill a man.
Welcome back to Public Eye. The conversation today is simple. In changing the country, what needs to change? The people or the system? It might be simple, but it's very, very layered. And that's why I have this sort of panel I have today, now joined by two more people. And I'm going to start my introduction from the gentleman directly across from me. Because once upon a time in Nigeria, if you had Sankore and you were a young person, you knew what that meant. Mr. Rotimi Sankore is a journalist in development and rights advocacy. He's editor-in-chief for Africa Center for Development Journalism. What I also like to say is, you know, at a time, before the times we are in now, everybody knew what it meant when you heard democracy advocates or activists, because they were the ones who were in the forefront of the war or the battle against the military in Nigeria before 1999, when we got this democracy we have been working on. Mr. Sankore was one of those. So in the context of Nigeria, he's a hero. Clap again. Much better, much better. Now, the next gentleman, I call him my learned friend, because when we start talking, I understand at the beginning. Towards the end, I just shut up. Professor Oka Obono is Professor of Sociology and Ethnodemography at the University of Ibadan. He has spent over 20 years working on population, methodology, culture, communication, health, and policy issues. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Before we went on the break, we have sort of laid a foundation of understanding that, you know, we did have, you know, well understood and robust political economy, you know, political economic ideas, policies, you know, and all of that pre-slavery and colonization. Then slavery came, well, slave trade came, because there's always been slavery of all sorts globally. That's a different conversation. And then colonization. And then we have had this, whatever we have been working with for a long time. And Dr. Eesuola has said, clearly it doesn't work. We should try something else. Prof, what are we now going to try now?
I think we have to try something more original, more indigenous, more endogenous. Endogeneity in this sense is reflecting very deeply on our histories, pluralizing that word. Nigeria doesn't have a single history. The nation states that make up the country have come historically from different directions for different reasons. When the Fulani first appeared here, the distress was in the Futa Jalon mountains that brought them. were unknown to the Kalabari, for example. We need to lateralize and deepen our understanding of history, the similarities, the dissimilarities, and then the contact points where we can start leveraging those things which bind us together and then build this thing called democracy upon those. That's why I sometimes think the phraseology unity in diversity doesn't really work. It is the unity of diversity that we should be striving towards.
What is the difference? Unity in diversity, unity of diversity.
Unity of diversity, for example, can be sustained through an imposition of a structure. It can actually marginalize and alienate minority groups constitutionally. You go to the Constitution tells you twice that revenue allocation in this country called Nigeria is going to be predicated on population size, and a parliamentary or political representation will be based on the same principle. Now, there are 389 ethnic groups in Nigeria. There are only 3 that account for very robust and large population sizes. The Kanuri in the northeast have the highest sterility rates. How equitable is it that you would ask them to reduce their fertility, for example, when they are not even having optimal population? They have the highest infertility rate. You're asking the Hausa, the Yoruba, the Igbo to reduce their fertility, and they, who should be encouraged using new reproductive technologies to increase their fertility, or my people, the Yakar, who constitute one of the most beautiful people on the face of the earth, across River State, to do the same thing when they are disenfranchised by such constitutional provisions. So you see, you can have legal documentation of the political will, and yet it is not equitable.
So the inequality is the main issue that we really need to pay attention to. And you also need to look at it demographically. I mean, there is no state in Nigeria where up to 50% of women have finished secondary school. You know, so you look at, the youth unemployment is close to 50%. So you look at the infrastructure issues, you look at it demographically, and then you look at the state capture. And then people are in inequality, and they are looking at state capture, and it seems to them that people from certain ethnicities have managed to capture the states more than others. And then all the issues of religion and ethnicity come into it. But, that's not the real issue. The real issue is inequality. If everybody had the same access to education, the same opportunities to housing, to healthcare, to electricity, and so forth, and equality was enshrined and promoted, then, all this, in quote, disunity would really be less.
Let me ask this, Doctor. Will scaling up not exacerbate an existing problem? Because it would appear that the problem itself, as Mr. Sankore has defined, is that we don't have equality. We just don't have the basics. And if we don't have the basics, it's because we've had poor leadership. And poor leadership itself, you said part of it is because we've abandoned a system that we understood for a system that we don't understand as well. But going forward now, we have to have radical solutions, because what we know doesn't work. What is now doesn't work. Which is interesting to you? Will scaling up make the difference? Or, as other people have suggested, actually going down?
Scaling up, scaling back, we give up the solution. So long as our action, either way, is premised on understanding that something is fundamentally wrong with the present one. Kọkùnrin rejo, kóbìnrin péjọ. Kejo Jamati law. Okay? What Prof spoke about is a recognition of the need to live where we are and go revisiting. It doesn't have to be historical, okay? But it recognizes the fact that something is wrong with the status quo. We now break it down. How we break it down is the methodology of it, okay? But the problem, the problematization, the statement problem is that something is fundamentally wrong with what we have. So we can take the scale-up approach, as you say. We can also go it the way of scale backward, or we have an eclectic approach to it. Right. What is important is it must be worked out. Prof's position is all about autochthonous solution.
Oh, I don't understand what that word means.
Homegrown solution.
Okay.
Solution that people will work out because they understand that this is not working. So it's not going to be a manufacture of his idea or my idea or his idea or the idea of the studio. We will work it out. And it takes time. It takes experimentation. But where to start is to agree that this is not working and we need to work it out. I like the idea of the rule of sentiment, which he calls it. And as he was talking about it, it was coming to me as an alternative to the rule of law, which, again, we met on the pages of paper. This one is autochthonous. At the scene of the accident, the law on paper says, if you hit someone on the back, from the back, you are wrong. Therefore, you're going to pay. But the society goes beyond that paper, sacrosanct, rigid thinking and sees a man who probably is struggling to feed his wife and kids, perhaps from a loan. And then the other man who has a car, who is comfortable and can afford to even change that light, because the cost of changing that light is probably not up to what he uses to fuel his tank in a week. So the society already creates justice there. And a thought is coming from there that for you to have justice, it's not about the law, it's about what comes from the minds and sentiments of the people. So if we approach our lives that way, all across, we're going to live this quagmire.
Mr.
And then we will now begin to...
I see you shaking your head.
We now begin to address all the symptoms, you know.
What he's describing is just inequality, you know.
Okay, so I like the way also he's put it. He said that what the inequality itself is a symptom. And to be able to cure a disease properly, you have to go to the cause.
Pathology.
You know, where it's coming from. Because this symptom is very interesting. Once I was talking with, you know, there was a conversation I was moderating on racism, incidentally, internationally. And some of the ones on the other end who were being racist towards black people, one of the things that one of them said was startling to me. He said, I am not against the color. I think that they are culturally unable to take decisions in their own good interest. Why have they not developed anything? You know, so
well,
it was...
The discussions around imperialism and colonialism will take a lot to unpack.
I mean, I didn't want to, but
Yes.
for me, in moderating conversation, I've always felt that Africa needs to have an internal conversation different from the external conversation.
Yes.
This is one of the internal conversations
Yes.
where we have to look at it practically, that these symptoms, and we can list a lot of them, you know, of a system that doesn't seem to work. What will change it, especially now, going forward?
The main point really is that there is no system. There is no system. So the inequality he was describing about the keke drivers ganging together to fight the big man's car. So the government's own data tells us that there are about 130 million Nigerians living in multi-dimensional poverty. That's more than half the population. So multi-dimensional means little or no access to health, little or no access to education, little or no access to electricity, little or no access to decent housing, and so on and so forth. So when you have that number of people living in multi-dimensional poverty, what will happen is that anytime there is a public altercation, the people in that category will come together to defend themselves.
Yeah.
So it's inequality, it's not really sentiment. So what my brother was saying about scaling up, if you scale up on the basis of inequality, you just scale up the inequality. If you scale down on the basis of inequality, you know, it's the same thing. The inequality stays. You just have, it's just the size of the governance unit that has changed.
Mm.
So what we need to deal with fundamentally is the development issues. If everybody has the same access to education, and when I say everybody, we need to break it down in terms of ethnicity, in terms of religion, in terms of gender, and so forth like that, then these inequalities are reduced, and then the question of what we practice is then resolved through that. Because if you say you are practicing democracy, the issue of whether it is parliamentary or presidential, or whether it is socialist democracy or capitalist democracy,
or something we create new.
Or something we create new. The point is, if it is based on underdevelopment, then it's not going anywhere. Then it is just exacerbated anytime there is an ethnic issue, religious issue, or so on and so forth.
Prof,
like that.
This, following on what Mr. Sankore has said now, that earlier when Doctor was giving an example, he gave the example of Qatar. So we could say scaling up wouldn't make a difference if, for example, you're just not going to use the resources right. Because although China is one country and Africa, the whole of all the 54, how many countries now? 52 countries, how many countries now? 55 countries of Africa, if they came together to become one nation, you know, so that we're now talking billion people to billion peoples, you know, we're talking about all the resources of Africa. But then if the issue is still, if this fundamental issue remain, wouldn't it be that it was just scaling the wahala up? Because people will argue, there are places like Qatar that are small, and they've been able to apparently, you know, take care of those issues of inequalities that we're talking about. Not, I said apparently, you know, taking care of some of those issues.
First of all, we need to be clear that there's no country that does not have its own dose of inequality.
Exactly.
You have, for instance...
And even to make even people riding cars have issues too.
With their own inequality. I grew up noting that my father never locked the doors at night. He was a military man, he was mobile. So that the wives and the children would learn to do that. But every 2 a.m., I'll see him go quietly around to check everything. But when you are born in a system where you have somebody you consider your wife and you have a child, and next week they sell your wife off, or they sell you off, or they sell your children off, that body of thought, which we are calling sentiment, and we need to be very generalist in our understanding of that word, very generalist, is not transmitted culturally. Culture is this bundle of ideas, you know, and ways of life that you transmit from one generation to the next. The African-American community did not have that privilege in the US. So the best place they could find in the modern context is the streets. Education helps to create the Obamas, yes. But very generally, that stabilizing idea of how to behave in a home was not there.
So, Prof, are you insinuating that the democracy we practice,
yes,
number one, that we should be careful?
I'm coming to that. To say there's no system ignores the fact that the word is even spelled out right there in the extended family system. The extended family system is just a geometric issue, horizontal
vertical,
and vertical. Family, well, system means it catered for people economically. That was already democracy. Catered for people politically. The family was at the heart of the organization of the spiritual sentiment. Catered for people educationally. When a child loses its parents in that Africa, one family will step forward and say, we can offer you where you can sleep. But we are not always at home in the daytime. So you have breakfast over there, you have not, there's a system, that's what I'm saying. Now that system, I agree with you, may have been what truncated, interrupted, disrupted via colonization and so on. But when you look at today's imperative, what we need today, is not to go back to the fragmentations which balkanization created and reinforced. Nkrumah was right. Nyerere was right. Patrice Lumumba was right. Sabora Masha. It is a Pan-African thing. When Ghana became the first independent African country, Nkrumah's own case was that this particular independence was meaningless unless and until the rest of Africa was free. Hence was born the Organization of African Unity. Today, look at what they gave birth to. The leaders need to come together to then ask themselves, with this pseudo-independence we have, and let's not think the democracy is ever pure. Democracy is always a mosaic. Look at the way the Great Britain organizes its democracy. The House of Lords is not elected. It's there permanently. And it's an inherited status. So let's not bash ourselves because there are elements here that are not perfect. Britain is more of a traditional monarchical society than a democracy as such. But nobody goes there. So what I'm suggesting is that, one, in order, like you, Fumi, just mentioned, for us to have more effective control, constitutional control over our identities and our mineral resources and our opportunities moving forward into the future, scaling up means that we need to see Africa as a country. It gives us that advantage. Then we can move as we wish without visa controls at ports. Look at what's already happening in ECOWAS communities. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
That's the so-called scaling up I'm talking about.
That you're talking about. I'm going to take a break because when we come back from the break, we want to talk just ideas going forward. What ideas do we want to take forward that might change things radically? You know, ideas should be in the air. We don't know who is going to catch it. Also, a lot of people here tomorrow, who knows what place they will end up in. We'll take a break.
I had the strangest phone call today, Adrian.
Are you there to leave a secret?
This was another lifetime. Before I met you, Ada.
It's all lies. Isn't it, Adrian?
There's some truth in it.
If your personal life is affecting your work and your colleagues.
If I had told you about my past, you never would have given me a chance.
That is not a decision for you to make.
It's good you came. You see, the Holy Spirit spoke to me about you.
I remember you.
We go way back.
Why are you doing this to us? I gave you everything.
This is a sin.
You're a coward. Get out!
Sooner or later, something must kill a man.
Talking solutions, what would you envisage? What should we be gunning for? What will our indices for success be?
Better development, better representation. I think that's where we should start. Because, as I said earlier, once you reduce inequality, if everybody has an income that is reasonable, if everybody has access to education, access to electricity, access to healthcare, access, to food and so forth like that, then you raise the standard of living. Then you talk about representation. Let's look at the demographics in Nigeria. 70% of the population is under 35. They're underrepresented. Half the society, women are unrepresented. If you look at our parliament, it's less than 5% women representation. Would you describe that as democracy? Would you describe that as equal representation? Of course not. So the youth are agitating, the women are agitating, and so forth like that. And most people are unhappy because they have to use generators, they drink agbo instead of going to the hospital, and all kinds of things like that. So better democracy, better representation, better development. Then we can start talking about Pan-Africanism and other things. And that's why I said to the Prof, if you scale up on the base of inequality, the struggle will no longer be between the ethnic groups in Nigeria, which have been misled by their political elite. The problem will now be between ethnicities across Africa.
If we agree that we want that, why is it different? What will help us get it? If we agree that we want more people to have more access to electricity, we want electricity across the board, we want clean water, we want jobs that really pay living wages, we want homes, we want education, we want healthcare. Nobody has ever, in all my years, I've never heard anybody say they don't want that. What will help us? Obviously, we haven't achieved it. What will then help us achieve it?
Yeah, I think what is missing is our approach to what we want. As we said, all the things...
Who is our?
Our approach as a nation to what we want.
He said, who is our?
Yes, as a nation. The Nigerian nation, in quotes, I'm using that deliberately. Is it the thought that dictates the action, or the action that dictates the thought? The temporary answer I'm going to give to it is that it is the thought that dictates the action. And so your constitution, your system of government, your policies in government, which have to do with development, education, and all this stuff, must essentially be premised on thoughts. And by thoughts, you could extend to philosophy. If something does not have a theoretical background, a thought background, a philosophical background, people will take it at the surface. It will not be deeply rooted in them. I think that's the problem we're having in Africa, okay? And that is why we need the ideological that will guide us. If, for instance, every government official, okay, makes policy on the simple common knowledge thought that ajoje odu, tenikan obani, inequality is taken care of. If we grow up with that philosophy, it goes into your political parties, it goes into your policy framework and everything, it will take care of all this. And this is where Pan-Africanism comes in. I was referring you to autochthonous African thought, and I mentioned Ifa. If you look at the way Ifa is structured, the man who is the philosopher in Yoruba worldview, Orunmila, was a Pan-Africanist. He was born in Okeitase, in Ife. I'm talking about Orunmila. But he, in search of knowledge, moved from one point to the other down to Cuba, Republic of Benin. Because he realized that you cannot stay at the confine of your home and get problems solved. That speaks to Pan-Africanism, and that also speaks to the need to be holistic in your worldview. So to be holistic in your worldview, your thought must form the foundation of your action. Therefore, I'm summarizing by saying that before things are grounded in us, democracy, I mean, how did we get the kind of democracy we practice today? I'm not against democracy. I'm against the type that we practice. We get it through the pages of paper. You learned it in school. I learned it in school. It didn't evolve from my orientation. My fathers, my great-grandfathers didn't implant that idea in me. And so I'm practicing it. It doesn't even make any sense to me. That's why I'm going to rig election. That's why I'm going to get 5,000 naira to sell my vote, because I don't even know the meaning of vote, theoretically, as it were. Okay? So you go to the House of Assembly or the Senate, and then some funny characters sit down there. Those who say nay, nay. Those who say nay, nay. Somebody will hit a hammer on the table and say, the Hayes have it. What does that mean? How does it speak to you theoretically? So when you copy ideas, hook, line, and sinker from other places, there's no problem in doing that. But if you don't have the theoretical basis for it, you will not be able to describe what you are doing and discriminate the good from the bad.
So let me say something.
Yeah.
Having just recovered from cancer myself, so
I'm really glad that you're here. Well done.
That's something to get right. It doesn't happen often.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
Would I have started drinking agbo without knowing whether it will work at all? But if I had gone to see an oncologist, and the oncologist says, oh, this agbo has been researched, and in XYZ dosages will have a positive effect on the cancer, that's different, because this is somebody, like you said, who has researched it.
So I completely, and I don't want to use your example because that's such a fragile, beautiful...
The issue is the expertise behind...
Exactly. So I'm agreeing with you because I can see people's reaction, and I'm hoping people change, because what is at stake is that we haven't done anything of our own in that way. You know, and imagine if there were more people, because it's not even just for us. We will contribute to the world. Already we do contribute to the world in ways that are not even known. But we will contribute even more for ourselves and then to the world.
For me, allow me to come in quickly here. I like your conclusions, your submission. We haven't done enough. The assumption that it is some man called oncologist who is an expert on cancer is because we haven't done enough, one, or we are not focusing on what we have done. A difference between African traditional medicine, for instance, and herbal medicine is that the latter, the way our father practiced it, is not just based on chalk and needle, leaves and roots. There are more dimensions to it. I take you back to Yoruba worldview in African culture. If they say something is wrong with you, whatever name, what we call is not what they call. The first investigation to be made is to go to your foundation and find out if you are not eating what you are not supposed to be eating. Allergy. Most of these problems have to do with allergy.
Okay, because a health conversation is completely different. We've had that before.
I'm situating it on the approach that if we are autochthonous, we have experts in cancer.
And we will create,
but their methods are different.
And we will create
they are not just chalk and needle laboratory method. They have their own ways of diagnosing and treating, and are as effective as other ones that we have around the world. We just need to develop them.
How do we change? What do we
That's
need to change?
where praxis comes in.
Yeah.
What he calls praxis. In the dialectic, you have pure thought, it's Hegelian. And then you reflect on the material conditions of your environment. That's the system you are talking about. Because what the self and the society or the system have is what we call a dialectical relationship. They are mutually reinforcing. The self acts on the system, and those who were not born when the system was created are created by the system. So when you reflect on the system and you see its inadequacies, you change it. Let us take the kind of wage bill that Nigerians reserve for their parliamentarians in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. It's unnecessary. You already have 36 state houses of assembly. At the national level, nothing is more logical, nothing is sounder than to pick the speakers of those 36 houses of assembly to become the representatives of the state at the national level. And let the other people go and find something to do. And they need not live in Abuja. After all, the governors of the states representing the executive go on a quarterly basis or as required to Abuja to meet with the president, and they go back to their states, and they are not paid a salary for doing so. The salary they earn as governors covers that. Replicate the thing that's already there in the executive sector in the legislative wing, and you've already saved monumental sums that can be diverted into the education we're talking about. I'm somebody who fairly believes that the democracy should follow demography. Amen. If 75% of the population is made up of youth, and since 1988, we've formulated 3 population policies, all of them antinatalist, trying to reduce the number of children that women are having, then by now you should be seeing reductions in allocations to the constructions of primary schools. Because you've been relentlessly working in that way, spending money in that way. Then what is it that the youth need? Their needs are between schooling, education, and health. We need to see in the budget an interpretation of that reality. But we don't see that. We have this Leviathan that's been constructed, created, inherited, and being perpetuated that does not make sense. And they build houses, don't forget, they build houses and allocate these houses to each and every one of these legislators in Abuja, as though they are representing the Federal Capital Territory. Meanwhile, each speaker receives reports on a regular basis from those other assemblymen at the state who represent local government areas and other entities. So he's constantly, continuously, consistently fed with the kind of information needed for a national dialogue. So right there at that microcosm, that cellular level, this Pan-African vision, we already have re-engineering. So it's not just upscaling inequality, and because tribal fights are taking place, they break loose all over the continent.
So what I hear from all of you is an agreement on the type of development we should be going for. 2, the idea that as we continue to grapple with our concept of democracy, to begin to look at what really works for us and who we really are. Bearing in mind that we must be careful what this us means. I mean, I don't have a solution clearly from this show, but I think many, many ideas have been thrown out that I trust that smarter people are out there and they will catch it and take it further in different directions that it needs to go. So I thank you for coming on the show, all of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you all also for sitting through this. And as I said earlier, if you have questions, comments, to send them to us, because we will include them as we go on. I haven't got much to say because I'm thinking deeply about everything that I've heard today. I imagine that you are doing so too. So I'll say thank you for watching, and we'll see you another time.